Tonight, I'm sure, are members of that club where you were drawn into some adventure with Nick that you didn't intend to do, didn't want to do, but he actually forced you to do, and you went along just the same. You weren't quite sure. Such was how Nick and I got to know each other. In 1994, John Stanton sent me a fax, and I know 99% of the people in this room know what a fax is, so I don't have to explain it. Saying that any member of the media who wanted to join their marathon running club and run the Vancouver Marathon that spring could do that. Now, I was working part-time at CBC at the time, so I thought to myself, let's see, if I do a weekly report on this marathon, that's one day's work the CBC will pay me for. So I pitched that to my boss, and they went for it, and anyway, it led to more work at CBC. So it was all good. Every week I would file a little report on my training for the marathon. And I'd never run before, so it was a bit of a steep curve. About halfway through, John said to me, I found somebody to run with you. And I said, who's that? Nick Lees. I said, I knew that Nick ran. I said, he runs marathons? Now, he probably ran about 15 or 20 by then already. I mean, so he said, yeah, we'll run together. So Nick and I got to know each other. We'd run across each other at various media events over the years, but it's you know, we didn't know each other well. We started running a little bit together, so we'd run together in Vancouver. So show up in Vancouver, and Nick shows up with a stuffed dinosaur. And he says, we're going to pitch this back and forth, because we were both rugby players. And I said, why? And I honestly don't remember why, but we had to carry that friggin' thing for 26 miles. So I know that many of you knew Nick so well and knew his character and his love for the city and everything. And then later, he got me involved in some of those 1,000-kilometer bike races that many of you did. And I know some people, a lot of you wearing your cycling shirts tonight. So thank you for that, for all those who took part in that. We appreciate it. We have a few folks who are going to say a few things tonight. We're going to kick things off with Alan Mayer. Alan was a longtime friend of Nick. They worked together for many years at the Edmonton Journal, where Alan was editor-in-chief. And he's got this eulogy to offer us tonight.
I always smile when I think about Nick Lees, and perhaps you do too. Nick was a man of many talents, which when added up made him one of a kind. Journalist, columnist, adventurer, marathoner, mountaineer, cyclist, fundraiser, romantic, community champion, wine enthusiast, and friend to so many. He had that magical ability to convince people from all walks of life to get involved in his wild adventures or back worthwhile charity events. And the steady drive to introduce to his Edmonton Journal readers hundreds of interesting individuals doing noteworthy things in the city, both big and small. And Nick, in his inimitable way, made it seem effortless. He was a positive energizer, a connector, an instigator, a dreamer, and a rascal. He made friends, and his friends became your friends through his column or personal contact. Now, I worked with Nick at the Journal for 30 years, starting in 1980. He'd been there off and on since the late 60s. We were both on nights for a while. I was a reporter, and Nick was my supervisor. He was fun. He was a fun guy to work for. And as one fellow reporter said at the time, the weirder the story, the better Nick likes it. Now, Nick went on to become the news editor for the Journal's first morning edition. It may be hard to envision this, but he was. But life on the desk wasn't a perfect fit for Nick's talents or outlook. He needed to be a full-time columnist, the likes of which no one could have imagined at the time. Indeed, a few months later, he created Nick Danger, his alter ego, because the column needed to breathe, and it was just greater than one man. Now, Nick Danger first arrived on the scene at K-Days in 1981, where he/they won a heat in the event's first demolition derby. Now, Nick was so excited, he actually quoted himself as Nick Danger in a column that Nick Danger ended up writing. Anyways, here's the quote. Danger told the Journal in an exclusive interview, I wasn't nervous, I was scared shitless. As he prepared the column in the hospitality room at the exhibition grounds that night, he uncharacteristically worried aloud that it was too cheesy to say this was an assignment for Nick Danger. But K-Day's bureau chief Paul Cashman, a colleague of mine at the Journal for many years, and he's here tonight, and a few other beer-refreshed journal summer students urged Nick to go for it. And that's when Nick plunged right into what Paul describes as a life of fun and adventure that delighted readers for decades. So Nick and Nick Danger popped up at marathon runs, an ambitious climb of Mount Logan in Yukon, parachute jumps to earn a Canadian Airborne Regiment t-shirt, fighter jet rides, charity events, adventures with cartoonist pal Yardley Jones. The list was endless. It was a lot of fun. Now, lest you think it was all fun, on occasion, the column had a more serious tone, like when he rescued Yardley from a collapsed snow cave after 10 long minutes of digging, or when he crawled into a hole under the convention center to save 4 abandoned kittens. He actually wrote about that. Or when even Nick Danger needed help, like the time he burned himself after using methyl hydrate to kickstart a stubborn clump of charcoal at his home barbecue. Or the time he and partner Nancy slid off the highway outside Hinton and watched in horror as their overturned vehicle slowly collapsed into a snow pile with them inside. Fortunately, an observant motorist rescued them. Anyways, after some years, Nick Danger and Nick Lees eventually achieved balance. Danger would appear from time to time in his columns, in Nick's columns, in articles, but under Nick Lee's byline. Meanwhile, the columns evolved and Nick's work became, some would say, more meaningful. His charity efforts expanded, and he supported countless organizations in novel ways, like when his Back of the Pack gang and the Doughboys carried a ladder to get over the wall in marathons and sold space on the ladder rungs to support worthy causes. He wrote about individuals and organizations busy helping others and making the community stronger. Their inspiring work and Nick's created a circle of giving and participation aimed at improving, among other things, medical care and research, helping refugees both here and abroad, easing the discomfort of children with serious illnesses, assisting individuals in need of shelter and food. He helped raise millions of dollars. Another element of his approach was support for lifestyle changes for adults to get them involved in healthy activities, running, cross-country skiing, cycling, swimming, on and on. If these pastimes could raise some money for charity, so much the better. Now, though, if you met Nick later in life, you would be aghast to think that he actually ran 55 marathons. But he did. His goal was 60, but he made it to 55 before his hips and knees cried stop. By then he had started writing several chapters of the book with the working title, quote, "Where's the Wall, Jimmy? Confessions of a Calorie-Challenged Marathoner." Alas, it wasn't finished. It's too bad because I read 6 chapters and they were good. If unconventional, kind of running morphs into a wine and food tour of marathon and surrounding countryside. Anyways, in this book, Nick said Runner's World magazine writer Joe Henderson once called him a physiological freak. Nick didn't provide an explanation for this description, but it becomes understandable in the chapter entitled Death in Venice Again, and I think it speaks to his refreshing spirit, good humor, and determination. It begins with, and this is Nick talking now, "It was less than 12 hours before the start of the Venice Marathon, and I sat in the gathering darkness of the Piazza San Marco, pondering my mortality. I hadn't decided whether or not to heed my doctor's stern warning or go ahead with my plan to run my 40th marathon. Pigeons were cooing in the darkness, a string quartet was playing, and I was drinking a Tanqueray martini to thin my blood in case I decided to run." Well, he did. Run he did, and as was his practice, he reached for a few aspirins at kilometer 32. It's 42 kilometers in a marathon. Unfortunately, steady rain had almost dissolved the tablets, which had spilled out of the plastic wrap in his shorts. So resourceful as always, Nick waved to a police officer, ducked in some bushes, whipped off his shorts, turned the pocket inside out and licked it clean. On he ran to the finish. And they say Venetians wanted to kick the tourists out. Go figure. Born in wartime Scotland in 1942, Nick spent a big chunk of his boyhood in London. He started work as a journalist in his late teens, chasing celebrities around Heathrow Airport in search of quotes for a news agency. He said, and I wouldn't doubt it, that he caught up with the Beatles, Elizabeth Taylor, and Muhammad Ali, to name a few. He then worked on Fleet Street for a few years covering crime and courts. In 1967, Nick came to Canada seeking adventure. He loved the country and he stayed in Edmonton because he was broke, it was so close to the mountains, and he landed a job at the Edmonton Journal. Later in life, he claimed he passed on Calgary because when he first went there, it was during Stampede, and he thought that was the way Calgarians dressed all the time. We're fortunate he chose Edmonton. And like many newcomers, he ran with the opportunities presented and shone big and bright. Nick was awarded silver and golden jubilee medals from the Queen for his community work. And in 2016, he was inducted as a leader builder in the city's Community Service Hall of Fame for his fundraising work, fitness focus, and enhancing the quality of life and sense of community in Edmonton. One salute to Nick, included in a tribute book signed by guests at the time, said simply, "Nick, you are Edmonton." Now, Nick dreamed big, and one of his best ideas was sparked by a visit to Haida Gwaii, where he saw the Mile Zero sign announcing the start of the Yellowhead Highway. Wouldn't it be great if a group of cyclists brought a Haida pole to Edmonton and raised money along the way? This was his thinking. The adventure was top of his mind for 8 years. You could rarely get through a conversation with Nick pitching this idea. He never stopped talking about it. And it happened in 2014 with about 50 people on board as cyclists and support crew. The ride raised more than $400,000 for the Stollery Children's Hospital. More importantly, the pole located in the hospital lobby is a beautiful tribute by Haida artist Ben Davidson to children who leave us too soon in the Haida and Cree cultures. You should check it out if you've never seen it. Now, with that trademark twinkle in his eye, smooth accent, and sophisticated wit, Nick encouraged others to be as interesting as he was. If you or your event made it into his column, you were happy. If you hung out with him, you were engaged. If you benefited from his fundraising, you were grateful. No matter what the circumstances surrounding the relationship, you were his friend. We all have our favorite Nick Lee stories. We can share them tonight, and most of them actually bear a strong resemblance to the truth. Well, Nick finished working full-time in the mid-2010s, but he kept on writing a freelance column about twice a month. He was always looking for material, always remarking on who or what would make a good story. And he kept up the charity work. 2 years ago, he thought his 80th birthday on October 14th, 2022 would be a great reason to help out the University of Alberta Hospital, hold a party and honor the memory of his parents, both of whom had died of cancer. The resulting banquet raised more than $250,000 for a purchase of a new piece of equipment to detect colonic and small bowel cancers. Sadly, 2 months later, Nick received his own diagnosis of prostate cancer. And he held on much longer than had been expected. About a year ago, he started living in an assisted care facility. The transition was a challenge for such an active individual, yet his spirit remained strong and positive, especially when friends visited to have tea or take him out somewhere. He was constantly talking about future trips to other countries, cruises to New Zealand, and column ideas. Now, speaking with many of his admirers since his passing, I've been struck by the range of influence he had on each of them. Some describe him as a mentor, a humble listener, always had time to chat, a wildly entertaining companion, a trusted confidant, a gifted fundraiser, a treasure. He meant different things to different people. Most agree he was generous, intelligent, imperfect, and larger than life. That's why we were so fond of him and why we'll miss him so much. Even as his health declined, Nick still had that twinkle in his eye, and he remained hopeful. And tonight, seeing everyone here, I'm hopeful that his spirit will live on in all of us, celebrating his remarkable life.
Nice job, Alan. So did you say you started the Journal in 1975?
No, it started in '67.
He started in 67, you 75, right?
80.
80. Well, I started in 1972, so I worked with Nick before you. Now, I was just a paper boy, but still. Anyway. I was in a few of Nick's columns, right? So you'd always phone me for a quote. Not that he needed me to supply one. He would supply the quote, and I would go, okay. I did come across this, though, just the other day. This is the marathon shirt that we got for running that marathon in 1993, the marathon finisher. So. Yeah, it's cool. I should put that up. I was also interested when you told the story about him and Nick Danger, who knew he was ahead of the time with the pronouns? Awesome. By the way, I know that this is a Nick tribute, but don't be guzzling that booze, because I know you think that's probably what he'd want you to do. Save a little bit for the toast later, if you don't mind. So we'll have some more. All right, we have a couple more folks who are going to say a few more things, great things about Nick. I'm going to welcome Jack Agrios up. Jack, come on up. Jack is a longtime community advocate for Edmonton, champion of many charity and sporting events, and many alongside Nick as well. Jack has many stories, I'm sure, about the great events the two of them put together. So please welcome Jack Agrios. Jack.
Thank you very much. Nicholas Lees. During one's journey through life, they have the opportunity and the occasion where they meet very special people who leave an everlasting impression. Nick was one of those individuals, an exceptional, remarkable individual, always one who you wanted to spend more time with. He was a unique character. Just don't make them like him anymore. Always passionate, always enthusiastic. Nick was a Scot who came to Edmonton from London, England. He'd been involved in Fleet Street, which resulted in him becoming associated with the Edmonton Journal as a newspaper person. However, he came in a creative era, an era in which Edmonton was vibrant and was enthusiastic and had remarkable individuals such as John Poole, Jean de la Brière, Bob Stollery, Don Love. People who were remarkable, people who were creative. Nick became one of them. His creativity was something that he always focused on. He was proud to be a Canadian, and his philosophy was always, what can I do to make my country better? Not what it can do for me, which unfortunately we see too often today. Nick was always one who loved his community, always given, always positive. Probably the most positive, passionate person that I was fortunate to know. Nick also spent much of his life at the Royal Glenora, and it is involved and allow him to become so involved in athletics. And during that era, his close friends Jan Novotny and Alec Podobrinsky used to always spend time together, and he and Alex used to contest with each other as to who would run the most marathons. And while Nick was an athlete, or professed to be an athlete, he was one who was a cyclist, he was a runner, he was also a cross-country skier. But he had an awkward style, a very awkward style, so awkward that he demonstrated that if Nick could be a runner, anyone could be a runner. Together with his good friend John Stanton, they very much created in Edmonton a healthy lifestyle, a vibrant style, which allowed many people to become involved with running. At the same time, though, Nick was an extremist. While he was a health proponent, that didn't deter from his love of scotch and love of wine. He was never fussy, though, what he drank. Quality was always a prerequisite, not quantity. Nick, as I said, was a runner. And 30 years ago, this past weekend, I was fortunate to run the New York Marathon. And Nick was my coach, my mentor, and my confidant during that period, during which we ran probably 6 days a week. And Nick was always there. And whether I had maintained my soberness in preparation for the marathon, that didn't deter Nick's continuous consumption of alcohol. During that period of training, Nick was with me every day, encouraging me, and together with my trainer, Simon Bennett, they enabled it possible for me to continue and to strive to succeed in New York in November of 1994. But what was important, running is not without its aches and pains. And Nick, of course, had the usual solution, horse liniment, which of course was illegal, but of course I was always rubbing it on every day to overcome those aches and pains. And I remember telling my dear friend Hugh Campbell, then with the Eskimo Football Club, about this horse liniment. And Hugh advised me, well, you know that's illegal. And I said, well, how do you know it's illegal? And Hugh said, how do you think we get our players back on the roster so quickly? A week before my final preparations for the marathon, in consultation with Pat Boland, who had run the marathon in New York a number of times, they came up with a plan. It was, you'll run the first mile 1 minute slower than you had planned. And the second mile, 10 seconds less, 10 seconds, 10 seconds, till after 5 minutes, you'll be at your normal pace. And that was so I would never hit the wall. And it was because of that encouragement that I was able to succeed. But talking about the wall, Nick was always concerned about when you ran a marathon, you might hit the wall. So what was Nick's solution? Bring a ladder. So if you hit the wall, you can climb over the wall with that ladder. That was Nick's innovation. And I'll never forget the time when I was by the Mayfair watching Nick with the back of the pack gang running the marathon in Edmonton, and they had the ladder. And every half mile or so, the ladder would go up, they would climb the ladder, and as a result, they would not be concerned with the wall. That was Nick's imagination. Nick, because of his running, encouraged me and made me aware of many of the aspects of various events that took place in the world, such as the London Marathon and other long-distance events. And as a result, I became aware of an event called the World Championships in Athletics. And through part of Nick's encouragement, we went and made a bid and succeeded in bringing that event to Edmonton. Nick was part of that bid process, Nick was part of the process of meeting various dignitaries and telling them how special this city was. Nick was always supportive, he was always there. Nick also had an incredible relationship with Yardley Jones, an era in which the Journal had real characters. It was an incredible time in which Nick and Yardley fed off each other, brought greatness. And I remember, though, I was having an event with the premier of the day, and Nick took me to Yardley's home because I wanted to present a cartoon as some form of a gift. And as I was at Yardley's home, I noticed they had this beautiful painting of the legislature where there was a runner in by the trees relieving himself. And I thought to myself, what a wonderful gift to present to the premier. And I said to Yardley, I want that painting. And Yardley said, you may have the painting, but I want to make some revisions. When I went to pick up the painting, the scene of the runner and the scene of the relieving was no longer there. The gist of the cartoon was no longer there, and regrettably, I never did make the presentation. I would be remiss if I did not mention Nancy, who incidentally was the true athlete. Nancy was a triathlete, she was a runner, she was a swimmer, and she was also a biker. Nick could never keep up to Nancy, and he acknowledged that. I'll never forget the Thursday when we all left our home, riding in our bikes through the river valley to Ernst La Boheme restaurant to celebrate Bastille Day. It was on that occasion that Nancy, shortly thereafter, met Nick for the first time. And within minutes, they became inseparable, and shortly thereafter, marriage became part of their relationship, and they lived together for numerous years. And Nick, may I say, had cherished, and even to his last days, felt that his finest and closest friend was Nancy. Nancy might have had a bit of a fear for you, but he loved you and adored you because you were so special. Nick was known, and you'll have heard his involvement with Casa Stollery, but I also became associated with Nick relating to the Patron's Heart Weekend, which was an event for the Mazankowski Heart Institute, which resulted when John Schoening, the then manager of the Jasper Park Lodge, donated 5 special weekends over 5 years to raise $1 million. Nick was part of that event, part of the promotion, and he encouraged people to come. We were also fortunate that one of the major patrons was Alexis Losh, who today there was a memorial for, and Alexis, together with her close friend Betty Carlson, was so instrumental with the result that it only took us 2 years to raise the $1 million, and we did not have to continue for 5 years. And Nick and other people such as Alexis and Betty were so overwhelmingly supportive in creating the success of that event. Nick was also a patron of what was called the Goat Dinner, an event held by the Rago and Sacramento family from Sorrentinos. And last Wednesday, we raised our glasses and paid tribute to Nick in his capacity as a patron who had been with us for so many years. Also, many of you will recall that a number of years ago, we felt necessary to have a tribute dinner for Nick. And we held a tribute dinner to raise funds. And it was quickly sold out, and we raised over $125,000 to assist Nick throughout the latter period of his life. Also, many of you will remember the 80th birthday that Nick had. And what was that 80th birthday related to? Fundraising. How can I give further to my community? And as a result, Nick came up with the concept of a special contribution that should be made to the University Hospital Foundation for a special equipment that was necessary at that time. And over $250,000 was raised, and two of the lead patrons, and I'll ask them to come and join me on the stage, were Donna Zakaluk and Peter Palmar. Donna and Peter, would you please come up here for a moment and make a special announcement? Donna and Peter were two of the main people behind this event and its success, and Donna and Peter had asked that you say a few words.
Thank you. Good evening. For Nick Lees, his 80th birthday was hugely special to him. He wanted to leave a legacy in Edmonton for his community. When he met with us, it was a small group. We managed to raise over $250,000, and we purchased for the University Hospital Foundation a specialized small bowel double balloon endoscopy system for the University Hospital Foundation. This system detects colon and small bowel cancers.
Thank you, Jack and Donna. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor and pleasure being the co-chair of the committee to announce that we have another $30,000 that we'll be sending over to the University Hospital Foundation on behalf of Nick. And we love you and we miss you, and God bless you.
Thank you, Donna, and thank you, Peter. At this time, I'd like to raise with you the Nick Lees Inspirational Award. Nick wrote about many remarkable people who did exceptional things. But at the same time, Nick was the one who also did remarkable and exceptional things. And Nick was always inspiring people to be involved, be it health or be what was good for the community, to participate, to contribute. Nick was one who was an inspiration. And in recognition of that, 4 people, Bob Prosnick, John Stanton, Alan Mayer, and myself, have been instrumental in creating the Nick Lees Inspirational Award, which will be governed by the Edmonton Community Foundation. And that fund will start with $400,000. It will exist for a period of 20 years. The 4 of us are setting up the guidelines, and it will go to those who do create an inspiration and instill the same spirit that Nick did within this community. And we're very proud, and we would ask that you might consider, as your remembrance of Nick, to also contributing to the Edmonton Community Foundation for the Nick Lees Inspirational Fund. Nick, you were an inspiration. A Greek philosopher, and Nick incidentally knew that only Greeks could be philosophers, once stated that if you could count the number of true friends that you had on the 5 fingers on your hand, you are a very lucky and remarkable person. Nick needed more than the 5 fingers. He needed the 5 fingers on his other hand also, because he had so many friends, so many people who respected and honored what he did. And Nick, I would like to conclude by saying thank you for being part of our life, and thank you for allowing us to be part of your life. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. And remember, ladies and gentlemen, if you're over at the U of A for a colonoscopy, please ask for the Nick Lees looking up your ass scope. And know that a little bit of Nick will be looking up your ass. Yes, he left a few special things here in town. Nick was very inspirational and very enthusiastic about the projects that he participated in. However, I will say that he didn't sweat the details. Is that fair? But somebody had to do it, and often it was Nadine Samisia. Please welcome Nadine, who has some stories about the great work that Nick led the way on and that she had to pick up and run with. Nadine.
So true, so true. Good evening, everybody. And yes, I'm Nadine. And Nick Lees, or as we have all talked about, Nick Danger, was one of my dearest friends. I get to be here tonight as to represent the charities. So as the Chief Donor Love Officer of CASA Mental Health, Nick works so hard for so many charities, and I'm going to try to touch on some of it, and as we know, we cannot even get close to all the work that he did for so many charities. So Nick used his talents and platform at the Edmonton Journal to create a voice for hundreds of not-for-profit groups that struggled for recognition and support. He created a loud, resounding, and hopeful voice that the community rallied behind. His stories about Edmonton focused on the real characters that made this city so special and the charitable causes that needed a hand up. Charitable causes from health and well-being to arts and sports were uplifted by the spotlight he put on them. Being a man of words and actions, Nick combined his passion for volunteering and adventure as inspiration for many unique fundraising initiatives. Running marathons, climbing mountains, and participating in cycle tours became vehicles for creating attention, raising money, and most importantly, having fun. And Nick loved to have fun. In his more than 40+ years career as a philanthropist, Nick had directly raised more than $11 million for Edmonton's charitable causes. His commitment had helped to create a caring and resilient community, and I had the opportunity to work directly with Nick for over 15 of those years and witness firsthand the good work that he did in the community. Nick built community, and he did this like no other. A wonderful example of this is how he fostered a community with our Cycle family, who through a couple decades now has raised millions of dollars. But more importantly, we're all connected at first as a group of strangers to soon become fiercely loyal within one another to work together through pain and sometimes a lot of suffering to make a difference in our community. Many of our Cycle family are here tonight to celebrate Nick, and I know each and every one of you are here thinking of Nick and thanking him for bringing us together. Bringing people together, this is what Nick was great at. He was a people connector, and few could deny his pitch for participation in whatever it was that he was planning. I know I can't possibly name all of them, but just to name a few of his accomplishments, that he raised money for charities. And some of these have already been mentioned. In the early 80s, Nick worked with the Honorable Consul of the Netherlands as co-founder of the annual Silver Skate Festival. Around that same time in 1982, Nick founded a celebrity cricket match, which was held for several years and raised funds for the Edmonton Symphony Orchestra and what is now the Alberta Ballet. The 55 marathons that Nick ran were mostly for charity to raise funds, including in 1982, marked his first Edmonton Marathon with dear friend and cartoonist Yardley Jones. In 85, he and Yardley ran the New York Marathon for Ronald McDonald House. Also that same year, Yardley convinced Nick, a non-cross-country skier, to take part in the very first 55-kilometer Birkie with him and Alan Mayer. The Birkenbinder became an annual event for Nick, and he convinced many others to join over the years. In 1986, he raised money for books for Alex Taylor School by running 287 kilometers from Jasper to Banff. In 1993, he began carrying the ladder during the Edmonton Marathon support the Hope Foundation and later on the Salvation Army. And that ladder, as we talked about tonight, became such a popular thing. He was able to sell ads on the ladder, and the proceeds went to charity. In 2000, Nick ran his first marathon for the Arthritis Society and continued until 2013. Hip problems prevented him from running more marathons, but he continued to support the Arthritis Society and was credited with raising over $350,000 in support of marathon runs. Between 2000 and 2002, the Back of the Pack gang continued to carry the ladder in the Edmonton Marathon for the Salvation Army, netting in 3 years over $250,000. And in 2006, Nick was the first to rappel from the roof of the Sun Place Hotel as James Bond to launch the start of the very successful Easter Seals fundraiser. In 2011, Dennis Urquhart, Honorable Colonel of the Loyal Edmonton Regiment, thanked Nick for organizing the Doughboys March and raising more than $100,000 for the building of Valor Place, a home away from home for military, RCMP, and first responders in Edmonton for medical treatment. In 2014, Nick challenged 6-time world boxing champion Jelena Mijanovic to a match right here in this room at the Chateau Lacombe to raise $30,000 for the Salvation Army and $30,000 for Santa's Anonymous. In 2017, Admiral Nick Danger and members of the CASA cycle team floated down the North Saskatchewan River in the 58th annual Sourdough Raft Race in Edmonton in their newly innovated pedal-powered raft. That was something. Eventually, Nick's passion shifted from running to cycling, and he became very involved in taking over the leadership of the Tour of Hope Cycle Tour for the Kids with Cancer Society. And in 6 years, he was credited for raising over $1 million. He then had a long-time dream to bring the totem pole back to Edmonton and cycling over 1,800 kilometers from Haida-Gwaii to Edmonton. And in 2014, the dream became a reality, and the totem pole was designed and carved by our dear friend, Ben Davidson. And 40 cyclists and our great dedicated support team brought the beautiful totem pole home, which now stands in the University Hospital. And as Alan said, if you haven't seen it, please, please go and take a look at this beautiful work. Nick was so proud of it. Again, the money raised for the Stollery Children's Hospital was over $430,000. In 2015, Nick's efforts shifted yet again to help a cause that he realized needed greater attention in our city, as he offered to bring the cycle tour to CASA Mental Health. At that time, CASA was building a new facility which would serve as the main intake center for CASA for children's mental health, and Nick pledged to raise $500,000 towards building the new building. The fundraising was successful, and the money was raised to help open the new facility. The cycle tour then became a signature event for CASA, and the Minds Over Mountain Cycle Tour has raised well over $1 million to date and continues to be a major fundraiser for CASA. Nick's 2 beloved events that he created that brought joy to so many over the past 2 decades were Pinot on the Patio, held at the Royal Glenora Club, and Zin on the River at the beautiful terrace of the Hotel Macdonald. These favorite summertime events had Nick organize, of course, synchronized swim teams and fundraising activities to Edmontonians as they tasted fine wines and raised funds for Nick's favorite charities. This past June, we celebrated Zin on the River the day after Nick's passing and toasted our dear friend Nick. As we talked about, Nick was so proud to celebrate his 80th birthday that was the fundraiser for the University Hospital Foundation for the specialist machine that they raised money for. And he was just so proud to be part of that, and that ended up being his last fundraising event, and he spoke so much about that. We know that his legacy will continue to live on through many initiatives that still honor his name, and I know this would make him so proud. I had the privilege of having Nick accompany me on his very last road trip in June of 2023, where we spent the week together every day in a vehicle from morning to night, you can just imagine, supporting our cyclists on the road, where he got to share with me his life adventures, his highlights, and his regrets, which he shared he truly had none, except for maybe not bringing home that Induk that he wanted to do with Maddie Decor on a fat bike ride someday. He never got to do that, but it was evident then, and it still is, that this is a man who lived his life to live his life to the fullest in every way that he could, right to the very end. I want to give my sincere thanks to Nick Lees for his outstanding work and for making our city a kinder, more generous place. The world does seem a little dimmer without his presence. We celebrate you so much, our dear friend Nick. Thank you for everything you've done. And to quote a dear friend of Nick's, Charlene Rutherford, "The pen is down, the copy is filed. Rest in peace, dear friend."
Thank you, Nadine, that was lovely. Now, you've heard of a couple of things that are still going on, raising funds, the University of Alberta Hospital Foundation, the Inspiration Award, more to come next year. And also, another legacy fund has been established at the Lowest Hole Hospital for Women. Melanie Nakatsui has established a Nick Lees Legacy Fund there, and she has started with a $5,000 contribution. So let's hear it for Melanie. Yeah, Melanie sent these flowers as well. Now, Nick's brother Jim Lees is here tonight, and we welcome him to the stage. Nick, come on up, or Jim rather. Quentin and his brother James are here. They're nephews of Nick. They've traveled from the UK just for tonight, so we're so glad you could be here. We have a little video of family photos. We're going to roll that now, so while Jim is speaking, you can have a look at that.
Hi, I'm Jim, Nick's brother, one of Nick's brothers, and I'm very glad to be here with you tonight. In memory of Nick Danger Lees. As my older and much stronger brother, Nick always looked out for me from our earliest days on Clydeside, close to Glasgow in Bonnie, Scotland. Nick was the oldest of us 5 siblings, all of us part of a very large and extremely close extended family. In more recent times, he lived at his excellent care home facility in Edmonton. I was fortunate to be able to make a visit and spend time with him, particularly in the garden there. And unfortunately, due to family issues, visits could not take place during this year, but Nick was always in our thoughts. And there were regular family phone calls, letters and cartoons, which he seemed to enjoy. Nick remained always very close to his family, and our mother must have got quite a shock, but to have been so delighted when she visited him in Edmonton to be piped off the plane in true Scottish style. Nick was a keen runner and rugby player, subsequently working via North Sea oil rigs as a reporter and journalist in London, before his enterprise and determination took him across the pond, finally settling in his beloved Edmonton. He loved working there with Alan Mayer and his many other colleagues on the renowned Edmonton Journal, where he made so many friends and raised such huge amounts for charity as we've been hearing. His fundraising bike rides are legendary, in which my brother Alistair, my daughter Liz and myself were privileged to take part. Myself in one such ride back from Vancouver Island and across the Rockies. An amazing experience, though my bum never forgave me. Nick had his rough edges, of course, don't we all? But his achievements, irrepressible spirit, and his love of life live on with so many treasured memories. And in this last chapter, he squared up to death much as he did to life. Nick himself might have added in his sang-froid kind of way, in the words of his old friend Omar Khayyam, "The moving finger writes, and having writ, moves on. Nor all thy piety nor wit shall lure it back to cancel half a line, nor all thy tears wash out a word of it." Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim. Very well said, and condolences to your family. Just wanted to pass out a few thank yous as well for everything that came up tonight and was put together. Thank you to Howard Worrell from Flowers by Merle, who supplied the arrangements for tonight. Thanks to Chris Duncan and the team at Production World for coordinating all the AV resources. Chris, great job. Thanks to Richard Wong and the folks at Chateau Lacombe for everything they put together for us, for the hospitality. And thanks to Nancy Tobner, Nick's partner, and the leader of the committee who put this program together. There was a lot of effort went into it. We were so glad to have those meals at Nancy's place. She wouldn't let us bring anything, wouldn't let us bring wine, sent me home with my wine. That wasn't shitty wine. Anyway, it was fun. And once again, thank you for being here. So we've all been supplied with a little bit of something to toast with, if you wouldn't mind. When everything is wrapped up here, there will be a cash bar outside and a special Scotch bar to honor Nick's Scottish heritage. So to our friend, colleague, bon vivant, raconteur, troublemaker extraordinaire, we say Slán Givar to Nick Danger. To Nick. So next time you go for a run, go ride your bike, or have a colonoscopy, remember Nick. Good night, everybody.